Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a couple weeks since I recorded. Life gets busy, you know. I thought we would talk about today. I did something cool here. I asked ChatGPT, I said, give me 20 of the top 20 kind of hidden technology subjects, you know, connected to conspiracies and stuff that is most discussed on the internet. And what's really interesting is after 800 plus shows, we've discussed virtually all of these in some capacity. And it's kind of interesting, the ones that it came up with initially. But isn't it interesting? This first one, ChatGPT gave it to me, the 4.0 engine, Harp. Right after Milton, right after Helene, and, you know, of course, there's other ones projected for the red state of Florida. And generally, you know, the red South, right? Just to disrupt things. It mentions Harp. And it says that the conspiracy online that isn't necessarily true is that Harp can manipulate the weather. Now, what you have to understand is weather manipulation goes all the way back to the 40s. They were doing it in the Midwest of the United States of America with cloud seeding and publishing it in newspapers. You know, it was no big deal. Great Britain did it and caused a great big storm that I think killed nearly 100 people, at least in the news, probably even more than that, by flooding an area that had never been flooded, the history of England's history. So weather manipulation totally exists. When you study the formal patents, and this might be scrubbed off of Wikipedia at this point, when you go back to some of my episodes in season 1, 2, and 3, where I was scraping it at that time and looking at the patent papers, it was patented for, in one area of functionality, weather manipulation. It was also patented for earthquakes, creating earthquakes, and patented for delivering mind control capabilities in that you could obtusely give a population a particular level of emotion, whether you be soothing them, giving them anxiety, or blasting them into sort of a zombified mode, which is not Walking Dead zombification, but comatose mode, where you're just kind of, you know, you're sitting in your sofa. So that was technically what it was patented for, plus a ton of other stuff, right? But you have to understand, too, this is my opinion. I think this has been done several times in the eyes of all of you. Let's just say that there's A technology and there's B technology, right? They're both going for a common goal. Let's say weather manipulation. A fails to pull it off, but B comes in, slam dunk. It works every single time, okay? So what you want to do in your disinformation campaign is to blame A, so that when people go down rabbit holes and visit these, you know, institutions, and I'm going to tell you a Jesse Ventura story in a second, they always go to a dead end, or if you research it's a dead end. Meanwhile, B is just blowing it out, right? It's knocking out weather. It's either creating high pressure systems or low pressure systems such that they get clouds to go where they want and clouds to disappear. Technically speaking, I'm going to tell you that the only thing they really need to do besides seeding moisture into the atmosphere is, if you can get moisture flowing in any one direction, if you can high pressure left and right around something, or north and west, you know, top and bottom, you're going to force what's in the atmosphere in that in-between area to basically stay in the low pressure system by creating these high pressure systems around it. This has been studied ad nauseum, right? So just keep in mind that maybe one of these isn't working out real well, but other ones are just nailing it, right? So I met at a party, and I've said this several times over 800 episodes. I met the one of 5 producers on Jesse Ventura's show when he was running around appearing to be interested in what we're interested in, which is telling the truth. And you have to understand, this guy was a fake all the way through. I mean, right after he got out of Hollywood and he went into politics, complete fake the whole time. This guy I'm talking to here is a legit dude, and he was like, man, that guy, I didn't realize how how much of a fraud this dude was until he produced the show, or he was actually on the team that went to the Harp antennas, because Harp is an array of antennas that is based on, they always say it's based on a lot of Tesla inventions. And it's like, well, these antennas work together in a grid and create this massive oscillation of energy. And at the last second, they can blast it up to the ionosphere and bounce it off and hit us on the ground, right? So what ended up happening, and this guy's telling me, he said they went up to Harp, but they have to fly in because there's no roads that get there. And that's kind of weird, isn't it? You know, protecting it from bystanders just walking in there or driving in there. But a lot of Alaska's like that, so it's not a big deal. But he said, look, he goes, I found out that we didn't tell them that we were going to arrive, which may sound completely legit. Well, of course, you wouldn't tell Area 51 you're coming if you wanted to bust them, right? But he said he marched through this front gate, and he's Jesse Ventura, former senator, or former governor, excuse me, not senator. And he runs into a guy that pops out, and he's like, hey, what are you guys doing here? Why do you have cameras? And he's like, we want to see what's going on. We want you to show us what's going on. So the guy is fumbling on television, like, oh, well, you know, gosh, no one comes up here to visit. This has never even happened, you know. So they edited it to make all of his bizarre responses of being bum rushed look like the conspiracy that this is doing something that's horrible. And it very may well be. But when you have to use shenanigans like that to create a false pretense that one thing equals the other, these are apples and oranges in terms of emotional response, it doesn't do the truth movement any favors, does it? It just doesn't, right? Now, the other one is, we're told that the above ground count of Harp is 1. And folks that have supposedly been close to this organization and been involved with geoengineering, which is what they call, you know, weather manipulation, as well as other manipulations of the genome, they say that they're on several different American owned islands in the ocean. That way you can't get to them willy-nilly, and you won't know that they even exist, right? Maybe King Kong will find one, but that's about it, right? So understand that's a pretty large project. The other big question is whether or not our competitors in the world have those kind of things. There were several of these sorts of inventions that came to fruition in the 60s and the 70s in the Soviet Union. There's famous cases where these giant antennas, which were very visible, were causing all kinds of neurological problems for Americans and other Russian citizens, because they're turning this on just to see what happens, you know. But the big thing about the mind control thing, because there's other mind control things that are going to come up here, is that you're just trying to give an obtuse emotion. We just want you to generally feel a certain way. In terms of sending in, you know, a desire for a strawberry sundae, that's very specific triggering of the internals of your head, as opposed to, well, you feel nervous right now. You feel jittery. You feel soothed, right? So if they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, and it's getting broadcast on television, let's just say maybe there's an election going on a particular evening, and a bunch of shenanigans are happening. And they're like, well, we don't want people to respond badly. So we are going to broadcast down to populations that we think are going to react poorly to this news coming in that their candidate is losing. We're either going to send down a soothing algorithm, or we're going to send down something that starts sort of doing shock treatment to their brain. It overstimulates their brain in a way that they can't think straight. So they don't even have the chance to put together a thought very well. By the time it's all over, it's said and done, and you start accepting the narratives that, hey, this is just the way it is. All right, on to the next one. I just want to say that because Harp was the first one on the list, and most of us think that some recent storm surges in the Southeast America looks pretty suspicious, as well as some other regions in the world, of course. But the next one's anti-gravity technology. And we have talked ad nauseum about anti-gravity in this show. So if you missed any of those episodes, definitely look up on either the website, deepthoughtsradio.com, or on the channel search on YouTube. So anti-gravity. Well, it's actually a kind of long story. We'll make it short on this one, but shorter. I have watched videotape lectures out of major universities going back to 1965 where professors were teaching 100% how to create anti-gravity. These professors categorically ignored the Michelson experiment, as they should have, and essentially built theories on blackboards showing you that if you could create a strong enough electromagnetic field that you would start displacing the pressure system created by ether, which creates all things in the universe, and you could start manipulating where an object is in 3D space. As we are on Earth, the pressure system is pushing down on us, so all we need to do is to create an electromagnetic wave above us, just like these quantum locked pieces of semiconductors or with dry ice on them that are on a magnet rail in a Mobius strip, where they quantum lock. It starts to move stuff around us instead of through us, and therefore we gain a little bit of lift. You do it a little bit, well, a little bit of pressure comes off of you, and you start to levitate. You do a whole bunch of it, and who knows how fast you could get going. The speed of ether was clocked by at least two of the most notable geniuses that ever touched electrical theory, Faraday and Tesla. Tesla based all of his inventions off the theory of ether, and then to be told that it didn't exist was hilarious. And again, you have to understand, I'm going to mention this several times, the Michelson experiment completely missed what the theory of ether was, and they knew they were doing this. So they defined ether to be something it's not, and then they couldn't sense it in this experiment. And what's funny about it is the oil companies and anyone selling energy, electrical companies, they always say, and I've heard this repeated to me probably 6 times in the last 2 years, it was the most efficient, most amazing experiment ever conducted in human history. They attached that to the flawed experiment in itself. Okay? And if you try to tell some of these Neil deGrasse Tyson guys what ether is, they'll get deer eyes. They can't conceive of it, and therefore they can't continue in the conversation. So it's a pointless conversation with these individuals. It just is, right? So anti-gravity is very interesting. Now, I work for a gentleman who was a very famous futuristic painter, designer in Hollywood. And because he was who he was, and he did some military work in the 80s, just painting things that they couldn't tell him what they really were. And it's nothing tremendous. I mean, it was the paintings are beautiful, but it wasn't like he was painting UFOs or anything. They kept visiting him, I'd say about a minimum every 10 years, but it seemed to me he would give me the updates every time they came to talk to him. It was like maybe every 5 years. They said to him in the 70s and 80s, look, we're using torus-shaped containers spinning mercury, and that creates pretty much an infinite amount of power. And then by 1996, they told him, look, we don't use that anymore. We've got infinite power completely down and anti-gravity completely down. Doesn't mean it won't be refined to be smaller, use less power, whatever. But I assure you that the people that work in anti-gravity are absolutely ethereal scientists. Guarantee it. They understand how this place is put together, and they're merely talking to it, moving it out of the way so the pressure system comes off and things levitate. Now, there's something called the Hutchison effect. I can assure you, through working with one of our other listeners who actually met the man, dressed like a woman. No, he was faking all of that in the video camera, and you would have to literally be the most incredible, innocent neophyte to look at his footage and think that you're seeing something legit. He meant well. Maybe he's got some genius in him, but he did not show you anything that was legit, unfortunately. But the Tic Tac and Gimbals off the coast of San Diego is the military, aka maybe Navy, working with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base 51 to build crafts that have this capability of traveling from 0 to 8,000 miles an hour, whatever the top speed is, without breaking the sound barrier, mind you. Because the technology that they are using warps the fabric of ether in a way that as it's pushing things out of the way, it comes back together behind the vehicle pretty much the way it was before it got disturbed on the other side. So you don't have this sonic boom, this clapping of the atmosphere. That's why it's moving all around. Now, of course, the other thing is that we are told that the footage that we saw by Top Gun pilots off the coast of San Diego was actually legitimate. It could have been complete BS, okay? Complete BS. We didn't see it. And all that footage that they showed us was utterly awful. A bunch of black and white, crappy photos or videos of this object with just maybe like 1 or 2 frames of the colored stuff. Just to kind of show you. So it almost looks like a render. When they want to show you what it looks like in color, it's just a still render. And then when they want you to believe it's actually moving, it's a black and white dot and some negative contrast thing. I think that's extremely pathetic. And then they also have this weird jellyfish thing that's flying over, I think, on the East Coast over another base. And it's translucent, and it looks just like super bad student CG, computer graphics. It really does. I mean, you should see what these kids pull off. There are craft out there, right? The Flying Triangle, which we're going to talk about. The TR-3B. And it's also, I think that one's called Aurora Project as well. But people have seen these floating triangles with, 3 lights on every corner. That vehicle has gone back to the 50s, where people are getting irradiated, and some of them actually die of their radiation exposure. This technology of ethereal technology does not need any type of radioactive emissions at all. It just doesn't. Now, the other one that my new acquaintance was talking about were the lights over the White House that were filmed a long time ago, and it was legit. I think they went over the Capitol building too. They're just glowing series of lights that visited our Capitol and then moved on. And he had heard somewhere where it was Nazis that were doing it, right? And this idea that somehow the Third Reich had all this amazing technology, the bell, there's this bell that they were working on. I think that might be a legit project, but you can do anything that you want and not succeed. And if the person who finds it says that you did succeed, well, you have a little fiction on your hands, right? But there's a big suggestion that, that the Third Reich won, but Adolf Hitler had to die in Argentina, and all these guys get liquidated, chomping on cyanide capsules. And, yes, a bunch of them got smuggled over and became the Central Intelligence Agency doing more mind experiments. And others went off and founded NASA for the most part. That's true. But if they had all this superior technology, do you think they would have lost the way that they lost? What it demonstrates is a complete lack of World War II history, even by the people who lost the war, right? If you listen to the victors, you're always going to hear the spin on everything. But even when you listen to the people who lost and the people that were damaged, I mean, look at Germany now, man. I mean, they got people running around on the ground acting like puppy dogs. Well, the other people, it's serious. There's a new video out that does this. It's like that country is decimated. Anything that it was from the 40s is gone. The liberal movement that was moving into Germany in the 30s, which was wiped out by the Third Reich, that's what it is now. It's that liberal, weird gender dysphoria thing that's in there. It just is, Okay. So if they had all this wild technology, I think we'd all be speaking German right now. I really honestly do. And there wouldn't be a lot of brunettes in the world, right? But they did lose because they weren't flying these bells over the United States of America. That was technology, I think, way beyond where we were aviation-wise, personally as human beings, because it's in an area of the world that isn't like Arizona, where you might get plasma balls ejecting out of the plates in the desert, which it does do this. People have been climbing out there, and there's a crevice, and then all of a sudden they hear this huge zing, and then there's a ball of lightning up there, which when you look at it, it's silver, and because it's spinning, it might be really oblate like a UFO, or it might be perfect circle, or sphere, I should say. Looks like the Escher thing where he's looking at himself in a chrome ball. And then they float off. And then when they hit, various air pockets and that kind of stuff, that's when they zip out of, they get triggered basically for a low pressure, low path of least resistance, and this is where you get the big giant, it disappeared. And it will block radar, and so it shows up. So there are very organic excuses for why certain things occur. At night, it must be like a fireball, right? So DC was in an area where that wasn't the case. The Foo Fighters over Los Angeles, they got filmed, I believe it was Los Angeles. Seems legit. It seems as if something intelligent visited us, right? Could be all made up, but if that was being made up way back then the disinformation tests were way more advanced than even we postulate today. Now, just finishing off this particular subject, some of these will go a little quicker, but if America, for instance, has zero gravity vehicles, okay, and we are supposedly at war with various agencies, then I have to say that the conversion between a zero gravity vehicle and doing things like using them in war, it might be more difficult. Maybe it's easy, but we shouldn't be losing anything to anyone, right? When I was in my 20s, I supported Los Alamos Lab database development, okay? And I was double blinded from what they were doing. But I'm always talking to these guys, and it was probably about a 4-year relationship with a little break in the middle. This is when there were Chinese guys caught giving, massive secrets over to China. When I was a kid, I couldn't understand that. One, how that was even possible. But two, how could this ever happen more than once, right? Well, it's because there's a balance of power in the world. They don't want, let's just say, for instance, country A to have power to absolutely wipe out the rest of the world overnight. So let's just say you got A, B, and C that are pretty big, pretty powerful organizations, either by sheer numbers or by numbers and their maybe low tech could still wipe you out, right? So there are organized technological transfers to balance the powers in the world. Sure, for liability's sake, they have to disclose it. So when our Raptor jets start showing up in China, as given to them by the Obama administration, they couldn't build the engines, but they could build the outside shell of it. And then they tried to hire Germany to build the engines, and then 45 came in and said, if you do that, that's an act of war, and they called it off. So those things are organized every once in a while. But if you had anti-gravity in your wheelhouse, you're going to win things hands down. Especially this anti-gravity that's like the tic-tac gimbal theory, that it can shoot off in different directions. I think potentially the gimbal and the tic-tac did not exist. What we saw was a bunch of orchestrated Hollywood, but it's a message to other countries. Look what we have. And then that other country has to say, well, with their little intel moles and stuff, do we think this is true? Do we think this is real? Well, maybe. I guess we better be careful then. So the other one is the idea that we have not gone to the moon with the Saturn V platform, given that it can't do it. But we may have created other vehicles that were zero gravity that could go to the moon and let us out. The problem is getting out of the vehicle probably requires more technology than getting there because of all the hostile environments, the colds and the hots. And what is the moon anyway, right? That you could just get off and step on it. And there's a lot of people that say we're there. And we're going to get to that too. So the next one is free energy. Zero-point energy systems. I want to make a distinction at the very beginning because I hear this a lot, and there's a distinction to be made with zero-point energy systems. Because of decay and entropy in the universe, we really are never talking about something that could go forever. Not even the sun will go forever. No matter what theory you apply to it, ether sciences will say it won't last forever either. The Earth definitely won't last forever. So what we are talking about is creating an energy system that is good enough for the lifespan that you need that amount of energy. And so you can use, perhaps, what you want to do is get something that already has some emissions coming out of it, right? So a lot of the stuff that you'll see online, it seems very legit. It uses magnets. It's a heavily crystallized piece of steel where everything's moving through because of the ethereal injection from the universe. Because it's very organized, it spits it out, and we have these poles around a magnet, right? Once you boil that magnet at 6,500 degrees, especially nickel iron, which is what they say is at the center of the Earth, at 6,500 degrees Fahrenheit, it goes molten. It's no longer crystalline in its structure, and therefore has no magnetism. So the theory that the Earth has a nickel iron core is complete bunk. It is pure plasma energy, which is the first time you can see ether when it slows down from 50 times the speed of light. It's, the average speed of light. It slows down, you start seeing lightning, right? So that's something I want to make sure you understand. We only need something that creates perpetual power for as long as we need it. It could be just as simple as a flight from here to Paris. It needs an engine that can get us technically for cover, maybe around the world one time. And you just swap the thing out, throw it away, and put another thing in there, and it's good. That's all we need, right? So 0 point energy comes in at a bunch of different areas. You've got people creating sort of Ferris wheel objects that go in circles, and they're legit. They'll go for a long time. Some people will use magnets and various copper coils to make something spin around. That's legit. It'll work for a certain amount of time. The thing that Tesla put together, and the reason why he shamelessly gave away his AC patent without any worries, was he was going to be transmitting electricity to homes for over long distances without losing any power by siphoning out of the Earth its plasma core, which is being injected by the sun, which is being injected by the pressure system of the universe in general. He proved it in Colorado Springs. What's funny is you see the picture of him sitting in the chair reading the book, and the biggest Tesla coil he ever built was just on fire in the middle of the room, right? What you were seeing was a Tesla coil that was one going down into the Earth to create a siphon, and one taking it out of the Earth and creating that big shockwave. He didn't buy that energy from a power company down the street and create that big electrical cloud. That's what you have to understand. What you were staring at in the photograph in Springfield, Colorado, was electricity coming out of it was built on top of what they call aqua ravine or aquifer, where natural water's coming up through the rock, and that's heavily electrical. But once you use his Tesla coils, which were not invented to create little buzz shows at museums, okay? They were invented specifically to create this siphon. So a Tesla coil is an algorithm, just like a transformer. You get a little transformer, you get a little bit of power. Build a really big one, you get a lot of power. So he built a pretty big one in Springfield, Colorado, compared to everything else he had done. Once he saw this work, once he saw he could siphon out of the center of the Earth, for us, relative to our needs, infinite power, he packed up and went and started building the Wardenclyffe Tower. The Wardenclyffe Tower was broadcasting dielectric scalar pulses. That's what it was going to do. Everything that's magnetic, electromagnetic, has two factors. It has an orbital magnetic field, still not electricity yet, and then it's hit from all different directions by the dielectric field to spin that magnetic cloud into an electromagnetic cloud that goes around the core of what we might call an atom, okay? That's why your physics teacher says, well, it's not really electron particle, it's an electron cloud. That's how that's done. So since anything that's going to be possible to conduct electricity, a valence that can conduct electricity, always has the magnetism orbit around it, all you have to do is add the other component, and you get electromagnetism. So you would have been able to hold your cell phone 20 miles away from a Wardenclyffe tower, and the dielectric energy that's going to be hitting your phone is proportional to what the phone can take, for one thing, but it's only going to lose after 20 miles, 1/20,000th of its concussive power and strength. So one Wardenclyffe tower could have, theoretically fueled a pretty big city. Maybe not New York because of all the devices that would be necessary. But eventually metabolized that up to a directed energy weapon that was going to vibrate a particular metal or substance at its native composition, thus releasing the bonds of the atomic material, and it would just obliterate. And he tried to sell this to all the different countries before World War II started to basically say, we will neutralize any planes in the sky and any boats coming at you. But nobody wanted it because everybody wanted World War II to happen. Now, just like flight for the Wright brothers who flew on camera in 1903, and by the way, we want to acknowledge the fact that, my hometown is named after a guy that flew in the air and surveyed the land down below in the mid-1800s, okay? We have plenty of aerial shots of towns. As soon as cameras came out, something was flying in the air, even before blimps were rumored to be heard in the late 1800s, 1890s in San Francisco area. It didn't officially exist until like the early 20th century. We have plenty of gliders and other things, and most likely blimps flying way before they said it was. But they told the Wright brothers, you can't file a patent for the ability for man to fly because the government's told us it's not possible. 0-point energy is one of those things. You're not allowed to file the patent even if you have it, and anyone who comes up with it has a health problem very shortly after that, which is usually terminal. I've never known it to not be terminal. So there are several different mechanisms to create 0-point energy systems, which again are algorithmic to its composition. Small things make small power, big things make big power. Might cost you a lot of money to make some of these inventions, but they're theoretically possible. Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam, it's interesting. It's sort of a catch-all for any anomaly that is visual in the world. If no one can explain it, people go, it's Project Bluebeam, man. It is I've heard it described in so many different ways. I've heard the moon blamed on Project Bluebeam, that it's a fake object, up in the sky, and that someone's got a projector that's going 24/7. But the most clinical definition of Project Bluebeam in a conspiratorial form is the plan to create holographic vehicles up in the air to give you the idea that an alien invasion is occurring. Well, I can say this. We have that technology right now. That's not a big deal. Especially if you had cloud cover. Oh my gosh, they just seed the clouds. They don't want you to rain because they want you to be able to look up and see. And then from the back of the clouds, from above, they could just project down anything that they want, and it's fire hot. And because UFOs have now gone from real sightings where you see craft that land and things come out, and hey, how you doing, kids in Zimbabwe, Africa? Now they get people to look at white dots in the sky. It's the lamest UFO sighting or claim for UFO sighting to see a white dot. Once they train you to believe a white dot, like the vehicle they burned into the negative of the day the Earth stood still, once they get you to do that, it's just an overexposed piece of film or just light in the sky. You've reduced the difficulty for them to fake an alien invasion by buying that as a UFO. I'm going to say, before you believe in UFOs, make sure you see a vehicle. Make sure you see an alien. Make sure you see something that's got some intelligence to it and not something that looks like day one of projecting light beams, right? Yeah, I want you to also remember that people who do negative things in the world, whether it be government or just individuals, if they plan properly, they like to get ahead of the problem, right? So they want to expose something fake way ahead of time, provide sort of honeypot stuff like, ooh, don't you want to come look at this? Don't you want to come look at that? And in the end, they drive you straight into a brick wall, like, Animal House, right? And that way you fail, you look like an idiot to your friends and family, And then they debut the real one, which is the super advanced one that actually is legit, and you may or may not ever discover its name, but then it starts happening to you. You can't say it's Project Bluebeam because that one dead-ended, let's just say. It's this other one. And then you're trained to believe what you see, right? If you like the subject of aliens, you got to see my episode called Meeting an Alien. You'll dig it. We take a really slow look at what your mind would do, and I share some of my own stories. The next one is time travel machines, and we've done episodes on this, haven't we? Just look up time in the website, deepthoughtsradio.com. You know, time travel has got to be one of the most alluring, wonderful concepts, right? To go back in time and see something that's gone, to meet someone that passed, to see what Rome was like in its heyday, whatever it is you want to do. Or in the most terrifying sequence is to go forward in time and roll the dice that maybe Earth isn't where you think it is, right? The only way that I would ever personally believe that time travel could possibly exist is if we are truly in some sort of computer simulation of some kind, whereby every single state of our ever being was recorded 100% in some memory stick somewhere, right? Theoretically. And you could be somehow airlifted from your time frame into a previous time frame, inserted without destroying the chaos that's happening in that frame, right? Because you're going to disturb the particles, you're going to disturb everything. Talk about a butterfly in Peru changing the price of tea in China. When you try to return to your time frame, they better have fractured that off so that you don't cease to exist, you know. So I personally do not believe that this is something that even really exists. Time exists in the mind of man because we have memory. We remember being small and now we're big. And because I think as one ages, we want to go back and experience things that were wonderful. It doesn't matter if where you are right now is wonderful. You still would love to go back and see Star Wars for the first time, you know, or do whatever. See grandma again who's passed, right? Smell her perfume and give her a hug, right? What's funny about time travel is it's a bit like heaven. When you ask, and you know, I believe in God, so don't worry about what I'm saying here. But when someone tries to go on and on about how they want to get to heaven, and then I ask them, I say, well, what is heaven? Tell me. They can't really describe anything. I mean, well, it's just great, you know. And I'm like, what is this? You can eat everything you want. What is it? What is it, you know? And it's forever, so it better be really good, right? With the traditional Christian-based heavens, right? When you ask someone about time machines, and you're like, okay, you believe in time machines, right? Okay, well, describe to me the base theory of how this is going to happen without gobbledygook crap that you don't understand at all, right? How would you possibly traverse in time unless you go to the soul cosmology? And somehow you're going to kill your previous self, or somehow you're going to, you know, walk into someone's dead body. I wrote a story once about a guy that was in the future where the population was really dense. And so one of the ways that they got rid of the population in the future was to study the history books of when someone committed suicide by non-destructive means, the OD or whatever. And so they end up, this guy travels back in time. He knows what apartment this other young man's going to kill himself, right? And it's not to be old to young or anything. It's probably 18 to 18 years old. But he sits there and watches the guy kill himself in his apartment. And he's brought the machine that'll revive the body. And he's also got some device to put his consciousness into the kid. And so he also has the device that will destroy his body that he brought back with him. So he comes back, the guy flatlines, he fixes the body, puts his consciousness in it, and then he wakes up, turns around, and kills his own body, destroys his own body. And now he has depopulated the future by going in the past. Here's a free movie for you. Next one is a quick one, but this is quantum computers creating mind control. Okay, we'll go really quickly. If you've never sat down and tried to figure out what a quantum computer does, go see my episode on quantum computers. I make it fun for you, okay? I believe there's pictures too. I know there's pictures. A quantum computer uses spinning currently phosphorus atoms. They're some of the most reliable atoms, and they spin in a 360. Okay, so what they do is they say at 12 o'clock, it's a 0. And as it spins around back to 12 o'clock, it has basically completed all of the fractions between 0 and 1, which is basically every percentage of any possible number that could exist. Then they send those into, every one of those stabilizes a qubit. They send those into algorithms that can think in a very three-dimensional, instantaneous manner. For it to be linked to mind control, well, okay. Again, obtuse emotions are going to be just loud broadcasts at you, right? I mean, think about when you listen to music, you're already being mind controlled. Listen to your favorite sad song and you'll cry, and that's mind control. Listen to something like Kickstart Your Heart and just try to drive 55 miles an hour down the runway, right? You can't. It just makes you go, 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 right? So we mind control with sound all the time, and we think it doesn't exist, right? Oh, it exists, right? But in terms of, again, super acute things like you hearing the voice of God or something like that, that is going to have to be very surgically inserted on every individual that's getting it. And as much as there's theories about using cell towers and that kind of stuff, we're talking about, MRI level precision inside the brain to make something happen. If you wiggle your head or anything like that, you're completely off. So I know that Wernher von Braun's assistant said that she was given a speech. She was given notes by him several states away. She legitimately says this in an interview. There's Wernher von Braun talking from a hospital bed to her 3 or 4 states away while she's giving a presentation, telling her what to say. In the 80s or no, it would be the 70s before he died. I think he died in 78, right? I don't buy it. I have nothing against her, but I don't buy that whatsoever. Okay? The level of literal precision in computers would have to be so much more advanced. I got buddies of mine that program for the biggest intelligence agencies on this planet who would know if that technology was hidden in some warehouse somewhere. Guarantee it. They're dead now, so I can talk about that. So whether or not you use a quantum computer or a normal computer or something else, I don't know if it matters. Okay, whatever. First, let's just figure out mind control is possible at these acute levels that they say. One theory that works, right? Sympathetic harmonies, invented in 1967, still obtuse emotions. And again, if you park a van out in front of someone's house and they're pretty stationary at their desk, at their computer, at their business, yeah, maybe you could just nail the center of their head. But again, the second you get a message from God, you're going to move, right? Oh my God, then you're blowing the algorithm. You'd have to get an implant on somebody so that when they move around, you can make it happen. Good luck. Secret moon bases. John Lear loves this subject matter. Secret moon bases so eclipses the level of technology that's even rumored to exist. It just goes a quantum leap past the most intense Project Aurora, mind control, all that kind of stuff, that you could literally take vehicles into space, take them to the moon, go on the backside of the moon, which again is probably, 300 degrees below zero, and somehow function. I mean, we're talking about, you can't use seals on a junction between 2 boxes. I mean, you can't do all the stuff that you couldn't do in 69. So the level of technology to pull this off, if any of you have ever watched the making of either Abyss or Waterworld, where they try to put a movie studio on the ocean or buried in water, they started learning all the lessons that sailors and merchant marines had learned for years. Ocean water destroys everything. Okay, it just absolutely eats it alive. When you're in these no atmosphere, super low temperatures, you're going to have to bring, you're going to have to basically almost like BioShock, bring the whole city with you and just lay it down onto the surface. There won't be any construction there, okay? But again, it's interesting to think that all of these things exist, where if you were to put a base on the moon, that you're not failing in any category of science and accomplishment globally. You aren't, because you're just acing it out. You try to do something and you're done. But we're watching them fail around the world with some of the simplest goals. And we won't get into all the conspiracies of how they're doing on this particular episode, but they are trying to make things happen and they can't make them happen because they do not have this ultimate power and ultimate strength. These stories are ways of smuggling in the belief system that they can actually do the things that they can't do. So be careful with that. I personally do not believe the Stephen Greer interview with the kid from Guam, or kid stationed at Guam, where he walked into a bar and talked to a guy that said he was on the backside of the moon for 2 weeks and he was all depressed about it. Stephen Greer was feeding this kid every line he said back, and he was so nervous, so incapable of talking fluently. I do think Project Disclosure has 3 to 5 interviews out of 120 or 130 that I think are legit. But that isn't one of them. This is a big one. Next one's a big one on Telegram. And it's Stargates. Finding, old Stargates that teleport you from our planet to other planets, et cetera, et cetera. It's funny they call them Stargates, and you're not traveling to any stars. I think it's just funny. The movie came out, and suddenly this became a big deal. What I have found almost categorically with anyone pushing Stargate theory is they're chicken shits who make Telegram channels without any comments. They just push CG crap. There's a whole bunch of like CG fake stuff, right? I mean, it's AI generated Stargate images that are made to look old. And if you keep your eyes open and you look at the images, they're just telltale signs, but they don't want anyone criticizing them. And so I think it's complete bunk. What would do this? Why would a stationary stone all of a sudden have some capability of teleporting matter from one place to the other? I mean, give me a break. The other one is, again, this is ChatGPT's list, right? It's black budget, military projects, citing the TR-3B. The TR-3B is very interesting because it's a triangle. One looks like a boomerang. And there's all these claims of taking pictures of them, in backyards, someone taking, looking up. Now, it's the most interesting sighting of this sort of Project Aurora triangle TR-3B thing is covered in my Men in Black episode. If you haven't seen the Men in Black episode, you'll love it. All these photographs. And again, you need to know, if you're new to the channel, anything interesting has got lots of photographs in it. It's just my mug at the beginning. But a guy who was a worker at a hotel in Canada on one particular evening was, I think, throwing away some trash or something. He was out back and he looks up and he sees this thing. He and a buddy actually saw it. So he comes in, didn't have a camera or anything. I think it's before we all walked around with 4K in our pocket. He came in and told everybody he saw this. And, from what I understand, they were like, oh, that's awesome, man. But, we weren't there. Sorry. But the very next day, 2 men in black walk into the lobby of this hotel. And I will tell you, given that this is on a surveillance camera, and they've interviewed the manager, the front desk guy, and a desk girl who had to talk to them as they were asking where this guy was, it is the most legit sort of alien encounter I have ever heard of. That there is a different race of beings that exist or get to us at some point. Now, what I didn't hear was that they never really got a hold of the guy and he actually survived the process. I think. I'll verify that. It's in the episode. It's been a long time. But these dudes were massive bodies with these little heads wearing the old kind of Humphrey Bogart hat. It was black. But they said when they looked at these guys, these dudes had literally white pasty skin, sort of hair that looked like they were attached to the hat. Some were kind of like wavy, curly in one case. But they were really strange. Their voices didn't match the girth of their body. Chick was totally freaked out. So in terms of TR-3B, with any theory about alien craft technology or our Wright-Patterson Air Force Base stuff, whatever crashed in New Mexico in 47 was taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We have the interview with the guy who's got probably about an IQ about 85. I mean, he's a good guy and he's got no reason to lie. He put it all in, well, they had already wrapped a lot of it up and he was just putting it in the back of the plane. He goes, look, I was carrying these packages and they had no weight to them at all. And I put them in the back of this cargo jet, which had to junction through Texas. And he says they landed in Texas and he's told that that's where it's going. But he said as soon as we landed in Texas, he goes, we had to put it in another plane that was headed to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And he goes, that's when they went inside and did the fake press conference that they had actually had pieces of this and it was just nothing more than a weather balloon. The funny thing about the theory of it being a weather balloon and this debris being taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for examination was that Roswell was the number one secret weather balloon creation place. You wouldn't take the debris to another place. You take it back to the scientists that made it if it indeed was that and it failed. They want to know what went wrong, but it wasn't. Okay. Now, supposedly the ship itself was taken in different waves to the base itself in the middle of the night because it was way too big to do anything else with it. Be interesting to know what the driving, you'd have to drive it pretty slow, but we're talking about cleaning out the highway as this thing goes by so no one sees it. But of course, there are military skunk works. Not a big surprise. The next one is uploading your brain to a digital media. Now, I worked on a film. My God, it's now a book. You can buy it called Topeka. You find it on Amazon. I have had, I don't even know how many hours of conversations about uploading your consciousness to a computer. The requirements of doing such a thing has to be that you are negating the existence of a soul, which means you lack a lot of experiences that a lot of us have had. But if you want to take a digital footprint of the brain and move it into a computer, you know, you're talking about MRI technology and you're talking about it scanning the entire brain down from 20 minutes on your average scan of the human mind down to probably more like a nanosecond or a microsecond. You have to capture the cloud of all electrical configuration and its genetic tubing of that particular brain. And you have to have the brain completely mapped. You have to figure out, well, this dude's, control of the right finger is between there and there on the tube, and this is his foot over here. And you'd have to know what you're mapping because brains are like fingerprints, right? They're different. They're snowflakes. So just grabbing that doesn't help you out whatsoever. And then creating a immortality. Our story had that. It's a fantasy. I think you have a soul. One of the interesting things that Stephen King did in a short story, I can't remember the name of it. It's a really, really like 20-page short story, was they created some teleporting door jamb technology to port, something from one side to the other about 10 feet. But before they got it to human size, they kept putting mice through, and the mice would come through the other side, but they were dead because their soul didn't travel with the body. It's kind of what he insinuated. But the finale is that a guy goes through and he's still alive on the other side for a brief moment. It's all sci-fi at this point. Will we ever get to that point? Well, I think that you will have to convince human beings that a facsimile of a living being is indeed still real. Imagine that you promise humanity, you want to depopulate the whole world. So you create this demo where an AI, using all of your social media interactions and thousands of hours of your conversation, like someone like me, it literally creates an AI that behaves like me in every way, shape, or form. It doesn't know my personal, most inner desires. Only the women I've dated would know those kind of things, or my kid, or whatever. So to them, I wouldn't be legit. But to the rest of the world, I would. And so you promise. Now, I'm deader than a fucking doornail. My soul is gone to the other cosmology. But if you can convince people that the AI, that was generated is still me. Then they'll go, look, he's still alive. I'll do it. And then boom, everybody dies, right? Next one is reverse engineering alien technology. I wholeheartedly believe this is real. I do. One of the best interviews I ever saw was, again, this guy that claimed to be involved with that technology. He didn't give a crap if he was being interviewed. He seemed to be annoyed that it was going on. And he was annoyed about sort of the lies that were going around the aliens themselves. And he said he gave the most comprehensive descriptions of why fiber optics was discovered at Roswell and infrared was inspired by alien technology. So let's just go over that real quick. Remember, I keep telling you ethereal technologies is how you're going to basically manipulate the universe in a way that you have zero gravity or anti-gravity, right? Because that is the case, the vehicles that we have captured, that we have seen, they run on a very lean algorithm of what we might call a sacred geometry, right? Electrical algorithm that will move ether out of the way to go up, down, sideways. And when they need to do deep dive traveling, they flip the vehicle upside down and whatever motors are in the bottom take off at maximum speed. If you had a vehicle that needed to engage ether at that level, you do not want to have electrical instruments inside your vehicle. It's too on point with the fabric of the universe. And so this dude said, he goes, the major difference between the fiber optic wire piles that we had coming out of Roswell was that these fibers already had light in them. When you would put them on a dark surface, they're broadcasting light, both sides. He goes, we inject light into the fiber to give a 0-1 binary protocol. He said, we could only assume they block it to create this communication protocol between point A and point B, the start and the end of the wire. At that point, it was like, oh my gosh, that finally makes sense. He's the only guy on the internet that I've ever found who claims to have eyewitness encounters with this stuff. And he made it make logical sense. The other one is infrared, and he said, look, the big almond eyes you see on these aliens, he goes, look, that is just a shield that goes in front of their normal eyeball. He says they have giant eyes behind that, but they're circular. He said that when they did an autopsy on the ones that have died in crashes, he goes, we turned out the lights on a particular just absolute serendipitous mistake, because suddenly we could see the room. And he's like, oh my gosh, and he's not saying it's green or any of that kind of stuff. He just, look, we could see. So he said, we sent that to the Skunk Works guys and said, you're not going to be able to probably figure out how this works because it's genetic matter, but this should be inspiration to tap into the spectrum of light that we're just not recognizing, amplify that and give us infrared, which we have now, right? The other interesting thing he said was that when they start looking inside these vehicles, and I can't remember if he said these were damaged and open or if they were just open, but he said, look, man, he goes, they were beautifully simple in some of their designs. And he goes, look, when the vehicle needed to stay level, he goes, they just have a beautiful piece of steel that hangs off a ring in the center of the ship. And when it hangs down, just like a plumb bob, if it's off because the vehicle is tipping, he goes, that tells the ship to stabilize itself so that it is absolutely, parallel with the center bar in the middle of the ship. Thought that was cool. He talked about the aliens themselves, and he said, one, he says, I don't know why everybody says they're gray. He goes, I think they're talking about their clothing, but he goes, they have flesh, and he goes, they're pinkish, but he goes, they have an oxidized pattern on their body. He goes, some of the cells are kind of looks like they're ashy, but they're not. He goes, when you touch it, he says it's rougher than normal human oily skin, but he goes, they're normal, He did say they're shorter in the 4 foot range, 4 foot to 5 foot range. And he also said that we call them parrots. He goes, because all the stuff about them being telepathic and talking to us telepathically, because that's all crap. He goes, we would love for them to be able to talk to us telepathically, because we wouldn't have the nightmare we have trying to work with them to reverse engineer and understand what they have. He goes, he said he worked with 4 of them. because only one of them talks to us, and then that one, when they have a problem figuring out something, he goes back to the three and they talk it over and he comes back. But he said they call them parrots because as they talk to the alien about, hey man, what does this thing do? And they're trying to obviously symbolically draw a communication protocol between the two of them. He says he would just start repeating back what we said. So it gets really frustrating. It's like he's trying to learn the English words, but he doesn't understand what they mean. Almost like trying to appease the conversation. And, I don't know if this were true, I don't know what the potential duress might be in that alien. He might be just like, no, leave me alone. Yes. Wobbly jingle job goes with Sudan poopa popper. Who knows? He just be saying something just to calm down the conversation. But he said about once a day they figure out one little thing, if they're lucky. Now, if you're interested in Bob Lazar, I got a whole episode on Bob. I don't know. I don't buy that Bob has 2 degrees, one from MIT and one from Caltech. He doesn't seem to have an alumni T-shirt. He doesn't seem to have any photographs from ever being at these locations. His mother would drop him off at Caltech of Pasadena, but anyone can go to the Caltech and roam around and probably buy a book at the bookstore. But why doesn't he have... Well, one, how long would that take? Let's say you're an uber prodigy. You're just trying to test out. I guarantee it'd take a year to test out of a PhD if you were just sitting there blazing through exams. But how are you going to write a thesis? How are you going to write a master thesis and a PhD thesis in anything under 2 or 3 years? You have to get your thesis approved. There'd be people who knew him, just students. Be like, I've seen Bob. I lived in Massachusetts for 2.5 years. I have, my father's a photographer. We have, 1,000 photographs of living there. I could tell you where things are, So to come back with a complete void of knowledge and ever being, and plus he would have been much older in 89 if he had gotten these 2 degrees. And his family would be bragging about him, right? Because he wasn't working in supposedly Area 51/S4 until after all this amazing education. So he would be known in his hometown as an utter prodigy. I guarantee it. They would have written articles about him in the local newspaper. One of the guys in my hometown ported the Windows version of Google Earth to Macintosh. They wrote articles about that kid. We got a Google, mosaic in the center of the town now at Main and Lincoln because of this kid. He's famous. Bob Lazar puts that dude to shame. But no one seems to know. Yes, they've proven that he worked at Area 51. I don't know. Someone's got to empty the trash in 51, So I'm not convinced he ever worked there. But his Element 215 story is a very ether-based theory, and he doesn't seem to have the capacity to utter the existence of ether, which is just really, really stupid and weird. I don't get it. But, I've listened to his stuff. I have nothing against the guy. I hope he's legit. But this now farmer guy that was interviewed with Project Disclosure, I think it was that, he is one of the most legit interviews I think I've ever seen. He doesn't have all the telltale signs of lying that a lot of these guys, the second they mention an alien, they're touching their nose and their ear and they're looking weird, and that's almost 95% of all the Project Disclosures and Camelot interviews I've ever seen. Anyway, next one is the Philadelphia experiment, which we also have an episode on. The idea was to wrap a ship in some sort of electromagnetic system such that you could create a cloud of electrons around this ship so that you couldn't see it, to make it completely stealth. And of course, the theory is, and this is all my episode of the exact locations, the theory is that it, disappeared from one port and ended up in another port several miles away and then back to the port it was at. There's lies about Einstein being there. The idea that this would suddenly teleport from one location to another seaworthy location, why wouldn't it be in the desert, like in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then come back to the water damaged or something, right? The most compelling argument that something happened and they may have actually phased the ship's DNA, its structural DNA, its atoms to be permeable, which is theoretically makes sense when you talk about ether and maybe vibrating the ship so it's almost in this mid state of constitution and people falling through the deck. and getting frozen in the center of the deck, and then it comes back to reality and you're just cut in half. That's more believable than the ship actually teleporting from one location to the other. It's almost like that's the way that you whitewash something that really took place. But it's all of the ailments and the number of Navy soldiers that actually had health issues after this thing happened that is one of the more legit, threads you could pull out of the sweater. What I don't understand about that, after I made the episode, it occurred to me, why would you ever put a human being on that ship if you're going to conduct this experiment? You would just, I think, get all human beings away from it. You don't detonate an atom bomb with a guy saying, we're going to see if it kills you. You good? You good? Okay, here we go. No, you get everyone off and you conduct the experiment probably on something the size of an ashtray first, then a car-sized thing, then a truck-sized thing, and then a ship-sized thing. This wouldn't be the first time you do it on a big, giant ship, and you wouldn't have human beings technically on the ship. It sounds nuts. If that did occur, and it very, very well may have been, whoever was in charge of this experiment should have just been disbanded and fried. I mean, are you kidding me? You put human beings on this thing, and you do this crazy experiment? It's electricity, guys. I mean, what's a ship made out of? Probably conductive steel. Everything transfers electricity at a certain amplification. Okay, you can take cloth that has no normal conductivity, but if you generate a lot of electricity on one side of the cloth, the other side of the cloth, it will cross that cloth eventually. It will. It'll just ride the back of the most constituted matter in the atmosphere at that point, negating free-flowing air. It will go along a structural line. Guarantee it. So go see my episode on that. The CERN Hadron Collider being an interdimensional portal. Interesting. I did a CERN episode. I think the episode's done well, but I think that the format, I just didn't have it down yet. I didn't have my mic down yet. So it is one I need to revisit anyway, because since I did my CERN Collider, the Mandela effect really came into the lexicon of us talking. And I've got 2 Mandela effect ones at least, probably 3 or 4 actually, I think in the end. It becoming an interdimensional portal, I don't know, to where, you're creating this proton tunnel where you're suspending protons going one direction, and then you're suspending protons going the exact opposite direction, and then slamming them together at the various colliders is the theory, and you use Sigma 5 algorithm to filter out the dust. It's all ether. That's all they're looking at. I know some freaking nerds did some stupid shit in the basement of that place. These little satanic kids. Well, I hope they meet their God at some point. In terms of using Shira, the god of destruction, okay. So it's just nerded out. They probably got 5 World of Warcraft accounts. I understand how that brain works and how, hey, maybe you're not the most popular kid, up to the point you work on the largest machine that man has ever made. And now you want to stick it to everybody. And so you try to make yourself stick out, and you try to put stuff out there. And of course you want, nerds want people to fear them, right? Because that's some sort of weird control that they have feared the world so much that they want the world to fear them now. So a lot of that's just posturing. These big type of hadron colliders too, they're huge money makers for the people that are the governors and the senators and the presidents and the corporate heads. It launders tons of money. It's 20 billion euro so far, right? And that's probably a 10-year-old number. I'm not convinced. I know that people have done, these weird interpretations of, some of the images they think they've created at the center of these colliders, and these guys will slow down every single frame to the point the fireball looks like the devil's face. Okay, I'm not going to stretch that far for anything in my life. I think the devil's here. I think he's alive and well. If there is a devil, he doesn't need a collider to do what he's doing. He's doing everything he ever wanted to do to this planet, and we're just sucking it down like it's the best burrito we've ever had, right? Not convinced, personally. So the other one is, I've never heard of this term before. They call it smart dust. And it would be basically the nanosystems that we know we have discovered falling out of the sky and what is typically called chemtrails. We got photographs of them. Nanotechnology has patents attached to it. And one of the most distinguishing patents that nanotechnology has are these rainbow dyes that they use to distinguish one component from the other when they want to look inside a human being to see how it's flourished, right? And so we have discovered all these patented color systems inside of these weird Morgellons disease sort of components in a human body. Now, Morgellons disease is named after the wrong thing, but a gentleman who was a former athlete, I think he was an Olympic athlete, he dies suddenly of this bizarre thing where he starts exuding all of these subsystems, these nanosystems out of his skin and lesions. His children had it, his wife had it. They took it on ABC and filmed like a bunch of little wires coming out of his kid's cheek. These aren't living things. These are crystalline structures that are injected in the body in little hexagon discs that are microscopic, and then they hit them with a piezo effect, which is you hit them with an RF wave, and just like those little snakes that you can buy for 4th of July, little black tablets, and you light them, and they create those carbon snakes that pop out of them. It's not that technology, but it's essentially, it fractures that little guy and he blows up into this little unit. They have these sort of snaky centrifuge things, and they also have these junction boxes. We have found all of these things inside human beings. I don't think this is necessarily put in all human beings in all regions of the world, otherwise we'd all be dying of lesions. But I think they have conducted experiments. Certain neighborhoods, certain food supplies, the amount of people that I know that have thought they had Morgellons disease and suddenly they get better. They could have had some of these subsystems, their immune system finally wipes it out, or the disinformation online is just horrible. I mean, swab your mouth and then put, eat red dye and puke it out just give your saliva on a plate. And if you see stringy things, that's just the cell structure of the inside of your mouth. So they do all these things to make you panic that you've got Morgellons disease. And the amount of people that study Morgellons disease don't feel sick at all, that suddenly have it, and then they get embarrassed a couple months later and they don't mention it anymore. That's about 99% of people I know. Do I think it exists? Sure thing. And I think it can come in all kinds of different forms. There was a recent medical regimen in 2021 and 2022 that people thought these systems were being put in their bodies. I will tell you, it's completely different than the stuff that's associated with Morgellons disease. Could be something else. So I think the thing that you need to worry about in that particular realm was graphene hydroxide, which is nothing more than a bunch of razor blades in your body creating clotted material in your artery system. Nothing to do with nanosystems. It's just you're being razor bladed to death in your vascular system after you take the regimen. Be careful with that. Next one, cloaking devices. We absolutely positively have cloaking devices, 100%, and it's old technology. What do I mean by that? Well, you can cover a vehicle and a human being can wear a suit, and whatever the light is on the opposite side of its viewing angle is punching through on the side that you're observing it, which is phenomenal because if you observe it diagonally, it still works fine. There was a fairly legit video during the 2003 to 2011 engagements in the Middle East where a tank is driving down this back alleyway and this dude comes out of thin air and it's just like the Predator pattern, a lot better than the Predator pattern, a lot less distortion, but he runs, hops up on this tank, the lid pops up, the dude jumps in, the tank shuts the lid on him. I've met soldiers who have worn this stuff, not necessarily that one. That's almost like a ballerina suit. But to make certain guided missiles work perfectly, you need a laser to hit the target such that the missile goes for that laser and it doesn't have to be guided intelligently after being shot. It's primitive missile technology that is then accented by a human on the ground, right? I think we're also 10 plus years beyond that need for anyone to be down on the ground doing that kind of stuff. So the need for this with drone technology, I really don't know if stealth technology beyond a vehicle being stealth until it fires around. You could have a stealth aircraft where you look up and it's sky above it. Well, what would be the need? It's just blue sky above it, right? But when vehicles are flying 80 to 100,000 feet in the air, it's so high. A missile takes a few minutes to get to it. I mean, not literally, but it's pretty much out of sight, out of mind. You're not going to have a problem. So the technology exists. I'm not exactly sure where you would want it. Maybe a drone itself might be interesting, that you could put some sort of, mosquito-sized drone that's going to fly up to a window and just land. And it's just listening to the vibrations of the window, where inside they're having a really intense conversation in secret. But most people have conversations in bunkers, RF-proof rooms, nothing above ground. So if anything really secret's taking place, it would have to be transmitted over a wire before you're ever going to get a copy of it, or you need a human mole in the system, or have to have some bug on their body to listen to or later broadcast what was said in the room at a later time. Anyway, I definitely think it exists. So they took Stardust and they put it in one category, and now the next one was nanotechnology, we just talked about, so those are just folded together. So this one I might actually do an episode on at some point. This is sort of the grand frosting of a lot of stuff we've already talked about. It's called the Montauk Project. And this was a big thing on Coast to Coast AM, guys saying they were part of Montauk Project. And this was I think it was inspired by the third act of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when Richard Dreyfuss gets in a red outfit and gets a briefcase and essentially climbs onto a mothership and takes off with the aliens. What they had done is they mixed with that time travel. And so, as I last heard the Montauk Project described on Coast to Coast, and this is literally one of the most hilarious moments on Coast to Coast, where George Norrie, the guy that was hired to replace Art Bell, Norrie just lets everybody say whatever, and he never tries to question logic, right? So you can just say whatever you want. But this guy's up there, he's a guest, I don't remember who he was, but he's claiming he's a part of this project. He traveled with Obama, and he traveled with some other guy who actually called up the station at that time and said, "Don't ever mention my name again. This is defamation. I will sue you. Don't mention it again. I've never met you. I've never been on any of this crap." And the guy said to him, "Well, I'm sorry, but you just haven't done it yet. You will do it, but you don't understand time travel." Hilarious, right? But this guy says, he lived on a foreign planet for 2 years, and because of time travel, he didn't miss 2 years on Earth. How convenient, right? And then they said to the guy, some guy called in, he says, "Okay," and he's totally buying this, right? Whoever called in, or he's playing him, right? He said, "If you were there for 2 years, what does it look like? What does their cities look like?" And there's dead silence on the other side of this microphone. And he's struggling, right? And he says, "It looks pretty much just like it does here," is what he said. "An alien world looks pretty much like our world here. Are you freaking kidding me? Unbelievable," right? He was a PSYOP guy basically practicing, and he got an F+ on that particular phone call. Yeah, so I don't think it exists. No, I don't. This is a weird one. I didn't know this was anything anyone was ever talking about, and maybe it's not, but it's called replicators, is the subject line in my output from ChatGPT. It's basically, does the government have replicators that are essentially, in some form or fashion, exactly what Star Trek portrays on the Enterprises? Computer. Having been a huge fan of the movie Tron, and having written Tron 3, at least a much better version than the one that was just filmed, I assure you, and working with the people that created the original movie, and sitting around talking about this for hours and hours and hours. My uncle, who worked very close to technology in different areas, was told me in probably, 83, 84. He said that they're pretty damn close to that replicator technology, but obviously inanimate matter, right? So I don't know if they could do an orange, because it has organic flow to it. But once you pick an orange, it goes into a necrosis stage, right? So it's in a decaying fashion, right? Starting to lose its rejuvenating ethereal forces from the stem, right? That's why all flowers have like Fibonacci patterns, right? So, and why the thorns going up the stem of a rose are spinning out in a perfect spiral. If you look down, the rows are all aligned from the thorns. This is the spiral of the way that ether comes out of the earth and pushes things up, as opposed to grass being pushed down by gravity, right? So replication, again, you have to have the ability. If you had a block of steel, let's say a little cube of steel, right? It's theoretically much more simple, theoretically, to just chip off the atoms, suspend them in some sort of energy beam, and get them to reconstitute on the other side. But you're going to have to reconfigure the force that holds us all together, the nuclear bonds that hold this stuff together. It's got to reconstitute on the other side. And it's that force that once you dismantle force, you take a scoop out of it, what do you do with the force that's on the edge that was holding the other stuff in place? So this would be theoretically a daunting task if you walk into a bunch of scientists and say, look, we want to move stuff from point A to point B. What would this kind of stuff be used for other than raw materials and that kind of stuff? Because this is actually a big part of my Tron 3 script. Which I think if you go to Google and you search on Tron 3 screenplay, my link is number 1. But it's the laser that's in the original movie from 1982, brought up to 2024. I mean, they create this amazing technology, and then the idiots who take care of the franchise never thought to use it other than to get into the computer. It's just so stupid. I make it matter, okay? The big thing would be, in sort of the conventional wars that we have today. Why does it take, 2 or 3 years to have war? So someone bombs the United States of America in 2001, and then we can't start any offensive until 2003? Why is that? Because it takes 2 years to move stuff all the way over there to a sufficient level that you can have a war, right? And you got to store it in places that no one really knows about, so no one else can bomb your stuff while it's over there. You got to have allies that are willing to take the risk of storing your stuff. All right, so let's say you can make this technology occur. No matter how much it costs, the government doesn't care. If it took $1 million of electricity to move an Abrams tank from Toledo, Ohio to Saudi Arabia to get ready for some offensive over there, they don't care. They just run that thing. It's like, there's no bill. We're just running it using some of the maybe zero-point energy systems as well that we don't have access to. And they would just move armies around the world. And probably not, again, human beings, but human beings can be flown a lot faster than tanks, right? Big cargo jets or maybe zero-gravity vehicles. So I don't personally have anybody that has ever claimed this technology exists, and even in the darkest corners of conversations friends of mine have had, if they've ever been told this stuff exists, then they have never disclosed it to me personally. So the last one is black goo. And man, is it funny how Hollywood seems to come up with a fictional villain, and then suddenly the conspiracy theory shows up online. Everybody's got something. Black goo, again, lives on these Telegram channels that have no comments, right? And if you dare say anything opposing what they post, they block you forever, kind of thing, right? The SGT report, it will block you in 2 seconds. If you say anything against, just mildly like, hey, I don't think that's true, boing, you're blocked forever. What a bunch of jerk-offs. But the black goo thing is based on the movie Prometheus. There are other black goo movies out there, but the best one is Prometheus. There was also, I think, sort of a black goo out of that horrid Star Trek written by Simon Pegg. Horrid movie. But it's just an interesting thing. You got it's alien created. Okay, so the theory is that there's black goo. But somehow, I guess, when it gets inside human beings, they're unable to take a photo of it. They're unable to ever see it. They can't poke their arm and black goo comes out. Whatever you do see is like usually a clip off some sci-fi movie that they've blurred and reversed upside down, so you can't do a reverse image search on Google and find out that it's part of a movie. They love when these things get proliferated out there, okay? The thing is, and this is in a lot of my alien episodes, if you like alien discussions, we've got a whole section on the website all about this, all about things like this, right? Which is, if you had this level of sophistication, and I'll give you an example that's not quite directly related to anything black goo. How many times have you heard the story that aliens have enslaved human beings to mine gold out of the ground or to mine diamonds out of the ground or something like that? And we very well know if that's what you really want, and you have the ability to travel interstellarly, let's say that's even possible, say space exists, right? Then you could make gold however much you want to make. You could just make it. Fusion, you could make it. We make cubic, the difference between a cubic zirconian diamond and a real diamond. The only physical difference between those two things is that the cubic zirconia is perfect and a real diamond has flaws. So when you see a jeweler look at a diamond to see if it's real or not, they're looking for specks inside the diamond that are naturally occurring from stuff getting crushed down inside the Earth's crust, right? So if you had a goal to take over humanity, there wouldn't have to be this secret black goo that only a few of us have. They would just saturate the atmosphere. If they wanted to go the slow, weird route, right? They wanted to control us as opposed to just landing and going, hey, you don't do what we say? Watch this. Zig, 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 zig. And, and your neighbor turns into dust. You're ready to get ready to comply, and, oh, yeah, sure, So this whole thing that we're getting black gooed to be some army somewhere, it's like that has got to be the longest distance between 2 points of an idea and a goal, right? So I have never seen anything credible about the black goo, but I have seen it several times online. So that's the list. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a great kickoff for just a ton of subjects that are on the website. And remember, on the website, we've got sort of what we think are, this is my friends and I that they give me their votes on the best episodes, the ones that are really fun, Bermuda Triangle, Spontaneous Combustion, Men in Black, all these really cool episodes. And most of those have lots of images in them. They're the ones that have been viewed sometimes the most, and of course all the moon mission ones. But it's all organized for you on the website. That's the cool thing. And you have to understand, YouTube's, I think, up to 50 episodes they've removed, because that content is something you need to see. So we'll link you over to BitChute or Rumble to see that. Every episode is on BitChute, all on one channel. So if you want to just get over there and see that, that's cool. It's also on Odyssey. Odyssey does a great job. So anyway, hopefully this was entertaining. I've been an episode a little while. Appreciate you guys being patient. Again, if you haven't gone to the website, please go. Everything's up there, YouTube, podcast. To all the Patreon and PayPal folks, thank you so much and make it happen. Remember, there's a store up there too for t-shirts. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.